Hello, one and all, and welcome to another thrilling episode of American Government. Today, we are going to be talking about media and politics. That word media probably sounds familiar because of how often people use social media these days. But when we use media in this class, we're going to be talking not only about social media, but about how the news is reported in lots of different ways. That could include technology going all the way back to newspapers and radio, and all the way up to social media on smartphones. Let's dive in. First things first, we are going to talk about somebody we don't often talk about in this class, a rapper by the name of Kanye West. In the year 2003, Hurricane Katrina had just overwhelmed the city of New Orleans. And where there was once dry streets and happy homes, they were now covered with over 25 feet of water. And as a result, a bunch of celebrities went on TV through a fundraiser organized by the Red Cross and asked people to donate money. They usually stuck to certain scripts, said certain things to try to get people to donate money. But what we're going to see is Kanye is going to use this opportunity to manipulate the media in order to get the government to do certain things. He's the one on the right. The person on the left is Mike Myers, who is also very popular at the time. In the year 2003, Shrek had just come out. So Mike Myers was very popular, and Kanye's first album, College Dropout, had just come out too. So let's see how Kanye uses the media to get what he wants.
The shape of the city has changed dramatically, tragically. The shape of the city has changed dramatically, tragically, and perhaps irreversibly. There's now over 25 feet of water where there was once city streets and thriving neighborhoods.
I hate the way they portray us in the media. If you see a black family, it says they're looting. See a white family, it says they're looking for food. And you know, it's been 5 days because most of the people are black. And even for me to complain about, I would be a hypocrite because I've tried to turn away from the TV because it's too hard to watch. I've even been shopping before even giving a donation. So now I'm calling my business manager right now to see what is the biggest amount I can give. And just to imagine if I was down there, and those are my people down there. So anybody out there that wants to do anything that we can help with the setup, the way America is set up to help the poor, the black people, the less well off as slow as possible. I mean, this is Red Cross is doing everything they can. We already realize a lot of the people that could help are at war right now, fighting another way, and they've given them permission to go down and shoot us.
So Kanye's taking some off-the-cuff records there. He's not sticking to the script, and he is kind of saying whatever he wants to say, accusing the government and the media of talking differently about black people than white people, and he doesn't like that, and he's going to take the opportunity to do so. You can see Mike Myers is struggling a little bit to keep things on track. He's going to try once again to get Kanye back on track. He's going to stick to the script, and we'll see how Kanye responds.
And subtle, but in even many ways more profoundly devastating, is the lasting damage to the survivors' will to rebuild and remain in the area. The destruction of the spirit of the people of southern Louisiana and Mississippi may end up being the most tragic loss of all.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
Please call.
In the past few days.
So you saw there how after Kanye kind of abruptly, succinctly said George Bush doesn't care about black people, Mike Myers was kind of stunned. Kanye was talking about the head of our nation at the time. George W. Bush was our president, and Kanye is essentially calling him out. He's saying this in front of millions of people who are watching this fundraiser, and people are shocked. The news cut away from him, cut the mic, and instead shoved the camera in Chris Tucker's face there, who was clearly quite surprised. And in response to all this, the president did, of course, get mad. He would write about it in his autobiography later. But in order to prove Kanye wrong, to show that he actually did care about black folks, he ended up stepping up the administration's response to the hurricane relief and started helping out lots and lots more. So Kanye got what he wants, even though he's just one guy. He was able to use the government in order to get what he wants and kind of manipulate things in his favor. So why are we talking about all this? Well, the media has a huge impact on the way that politics work in America. And over the course of the next couple minutes, we're going to talk about how that is. So very top of your notes. Why do we need the media? Well, in most cases, Most citizens have no chance to see the government firsthand. We're living here in St. Louis. News happens all over the world. And we need journalists and media outlets to go to those places and see what's going on and interpret the news for us. Media has changed a lot over the past few years, even in your lifetime, and that's because technology has been changing too. The media holds a few different roles. The first thing that they're concerned with is entertainment, right? They need viewers to tune in and look at their screens, whether it is a TV show or a website. They got to have clicks or viewers in order to stay in business. That's why a lot of times they will talk about celebrities like Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. As of this recording, kind of happened fairly recently. It's not really news. Nobody really needs to know about it except their friends and family. But the news is covering it like it's some sort of national story that everybody should know about. And that's because they know that people care about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, and they'll tune in to find out more information about it. After they entertain, then their goal is to actually report the news. So they want to inform people about those 5 W's and an H: the who, what, when, where, how, and why. They want to inform people, and then they want to interpret what is going on, because a lot of what the government does is pretty complicated and hard to break down. So we have people who are kind of personalities on both the liberal side and the conservative side called pundits, who will take the information of the day and try to break it down into easily understandable clips. Like I said, there are people from the left and the right, so they're often competing about their views, and sometimes they could be trying to influence the public along the way. As news stories are covered by the media, they become important to the people. The media is going to cover what's important, and then what's important will then get covered. So it kind of goes in a spiral. So, for example, let's take the issue of the Kanye West story, right? Kanye West goes on national TV in front of millions of people, calls out the president. That's a big news story. In order to not have a bad reputation, George W. Bush steps up his policies about what he's going to do. So he is affected by the public who might start accusing him of not caring about the Black community. So he ends up stepping up his response, and then the media covers George W.'s response, and then the cycle goes around again and again and again. The next thing that the media is going to try to do is act as a political socialization agent. That means that they're going to try to educate people about how the government works. I've got a little picture here of one person teaching other people about how the Electoral College works, because once you get out of high school, chances are you won't talk about the Electoral College except for every 4 years when it's necessary. So the politics on the news oftentimes will pop back in every 4 years and inform people about what's going on. The next thing that they do is want to provide a political forum to the politicians. Excuse me. Hopefully that's not coming up too loud. They want to give politicians the chance to speak with one another in front of the public. So every once in a while, presidents will give speeches, or candidates might debate each other on stage in front of an audience and in front of the nation. So that forum, that place to share their ideas, is something that the media is really good at too. And again, to go back to the idea of entertaining, the one thing that these media organizations have to do is make money, because with a few exceptions that are partially funded by different governments, the media is a business, and they have to make profits by selling advertisements. And a lot of times business is very good. These are 2 of the richest people in the world. We have over on the left, the head of Fox News, Rupert Murdoch, and the head of Time Warner. His name is Ted Turner. Okay. They are 2. So we've got the head of Fox News, that was the guy on the left, and the head of Time Warner on the right. But really, they're kind of big 6 big media conglomerates that control what we call the mainstream media. That's 99% of what you see on cable TV and in the news media. The Six companies that you see here control a lot of what gets talked about, and some people don't like that. For instance, Rupert Murdoch here, we see him, he controls a lot of different companies over the course of 3 different continents. And some people dislike that idea because as more and more news becomes more and more concentrated, we see that an opportunity for bias comes in. For example, if a story that paints Rupert Murdoch in a bad light comes across the news desk at Fox TV, they're probably not going to want to talk about how their boss did something bad. So that leads to some bias. There's a lot of talk about whether or not the news is biased, and the answer is yes, it is biased. But the good news is that there's a lot of diversity in the media. So we can still be sure that every view gets presented, especially in the digital age we live in now, when anybody can post videos to social media. So you get to see some unfiltered versions of the truth. And even though the mainstream media might be biased in slightly different ways, they're always going to play towards what is going to make them the most money. And since most of America is the moderate, they're going to stick to pretty moderate ideas. Okay, for example, there was a guy named Alex Jones who was pretty comfy in the conservative circles on different news media websites, but then he started talking about how the Sandy Hook massacre was not real and that the children who died there never existed, and the parents who claimed to have them as children were paid actors, and that it was all set up to try to restrict more gun control. That is not true and very far away from what most people believe. So Alex Jones alienated his viewers. He kind of got pushed to the corner of the internet, and mainstream media has kind of left him behind for the most part. So while the media is biased, they're always going to be biased towards what's going to make them the most money and what's going to get them the most ratings and readership. Sometimes it also leads to inventing stories. It's possible sometimes for a short story to be so endlessly repeated over and over and over again that somebody might start to think that it's true. These news stations are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They always got to be talking about something. So when somebody comes along with an interesting story, even though it might not be true, they might give some airtime to that untrue idea. And then that person gets more and more steam built up behind them, more momentum, and people might think that that idea is true. For example, during the Obama administration, then just businessman Trump came up with the idea that maybe Obama wasn't actually born in America, meaning that he wasn't able to be president. This was not true. President Obama produced his birth certificate, and everybody who saw it was convinced, and the authenticity was confirmed, but it didn't stop people from saying it again and again and again and again, which led to people thinking that it might be true. Sometimes sharing the truth can be scary. Okay, the big media conglomerates, they like the way that things are. They like the status quo. So they tend to cover small and trivial problems rather than much bigger and more serious issues. We also have an issue of having just feel-good stories to keep readers or viewers there, like the Taylor Swift story. Might seem like a nice, happy story, or they might want to share stories that make the U.S. government look good, but that can overlook bigger problems within the government. We also have an issue of having outsiders versus insiders. Sometimes a politician will want to make news stories so that they can get hired by a news corporation. So they will feed information to news companies that they shouldn't, or sometimes somebody in the news might want to get hired by somebody in the government. So they might make a certain politician look good so that after they quit their current job, they can get hired by that politician. That's called a revolving door. So we got some issues there. Now, I don't want to end on a negative note. We talked a little bit about the problems with American media, but I want to end by talking about some nice things. They're very good at exposing corruption. For example, the Watergate scandal was uncovered by 2 journalists and exposed how President Nixon was spying on the Democrats and spying on American citizens here in America. The Pentagon Papers showed that when we invaded Vietnam during the Vietnam War, we did so based off of something that was not 100% true. And tens of thousands of people died fighting a war that was built off of reasons that turned out not to be true. More recently, we found out that an American military base called Guantanamo Bay was mentally and physically torturing people who were suspected of terrorism. And during your lifetime, Edward Snowden, who worked for the NSA, exposed the fact that the CIA was doing a lot of things that were ethically wrong, but not technically illegal, like keeping track of people's phone records without a warrant because they were potentially terrorists. So again, they expose a lot of scandals and they provide support during tragedy, like during 9/11 or like during the hurricanes. They give people a way to get information about their loved ones and perhaps a way to help too. And finally, they provide a lot of info during elections. They inform supporters and talk about who the winners are. All right. Thank you so much for paying attention today. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.